this great inheritance and of the duties and heavy responsibilities of sovereignty, which have now passed to my beloved daughter.
The words were delivered without hesitation, but their meaning struck the royal household like a bell in a silent chapel. Prince William had confirmed that Catherine would become the sole owner of Queen Elizabeth's private garden, an intensely personal sanctuary, guarded for decades from public access and family ambition. What appeared to be a graceful inheritance was, in truth, a declaration of trust, authority, and exclusion. And one royal reaction revealed just how dangerous that declaration had become. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William kept his voice controlled as he confirmed the exact terms. Catherine, Princess of Wales, now held ownership of the secluded grounds, greenhouse, cottage, and family entrance. Sole ownership meant no second royal could claim equal control, and no palace office could treat the garden as shared property. That mattered, because the sanctuary had never been ordinary land. Elizabeth had used it during family crises, political strain, and private grief, allowing only a small circle inside without staff. Catherine did not smile. She lowered her eyes, pressed her fingers against the table, and asked William whether the decision was final. The prince answered that it was. Her reaction carried no triumph, only the weight of being trusted with the place the late monarch had protected most fiercely. She understood that accepting the garden meant accepting Elizabeth's final judgment about restraint and loyalty. Camilla froze when the wording reached her. The queen consort stopped halfway through removing her gloves and asked whether her position still guaranteed entry. It did not. Her title gave her ceremonial standing, meaning public rank and duty, not private ownership. She could enter only if Catherine allowed it. The distinction cut deeper than any public insult, because it exposed where Elizabeth's private confidence had rested forever. William then revealed the sealed ownership clause through the late Queen's documented instructions. The clause prevented the garden from being absorbed into another royal residence, reassigned by household officials, or managed through Camilla's office. He had reviewed those instructions days earlier, and remained silent until every safeguard was secured. He feared early disclosure would pressure Catherine into shared stewardship before she understood what Elizabeth intended. Minutes later, Camilla requested a private audience. She told William that a recorded conversation with Elizabeth had promised her a continuing role in the garden. The prince knew the claim could not be ignored. But before he could defend the decision, everyone involved had to face a more painful truth. The garden did not mean the same thing to Catherine, Camilla, Charles, or the man now standing between them. Behind the stone walls of the private garden lay 4 very different versions of the past. To Catherine, it represented a promise she had never spoken aloud. To William, it was the last place where his grandmother had treated him not as a future king, but as a frightened grandson. To Charles, it carried memories of childhood distance. And to Camilla, the locked gate now appeared to confirm a fear she could no longer dismiss. She remained outside Elizabeth's deepest trust. Catherine remembered the quiet afternoons she had spent there during the first difficult years of royal life. Queen Elizabeth had never given her grand speeches. She had simply taught her when silence protected dignity and when silence became surrender. The monarch showed her that family loyalty did not mean accepting every demand. Those lessons mattered now, because the garden was not just an inheritance. It was proof that Elizabeth believed she had understood them. William carried a different memory. Years earlier, after a bitter family argument, the late queen had taken him into the garden without advisors or officials. She reminded him that inherited duty meant nothing without personal boundaries. The prince had never forgotten those words. Now, as he watched Catherine absorb the decision, he understood that his grandmother had placed that same moral responsibility in her hands. Charles read the ownership confirmation alone. The king turned the final page, placed it face down on his desk, and remained silent. He did not resent Catherine, but the decision forced him to face a painful truth. His mother had entrusted her most private refuge to the next generation, not to him. The private garden had once been her shelter from royal pressure, and now it had become evidence of how far emotional distance had grown between mother and son. Camilla felt the wound even more sharply. Sitting beside Charles, the Queen Consort asked whether Elizabeth was still judging her from beyond the grave. Sole ownership meant complete personal control, with no automatic right for another royal office to interfere. The king looked toward the closed document but gave no answer. His silence left her exposed, because disagreement could be challenged, but silence felt like confirmation. William then made the hidden truth clear through a documented account of the inheritance process. Catherine had never requested the garden, never campaigned for it, and never knew the full terms. Elizabeth had created the arrangement independently after watching her remain calm during a private family crisis. The choice had been deliberate. A private access register deepened the shock. The ledger, meaning the official record of who could enter without special permission, listed permanent approval for William and Catherine. Camilla's name had never appeared. Every previous visit had depended on Elizabeth's personal invitation. Charles finally summoned his son and asked whether Camilla could receive a symbolic joint role. William heard the danger immediately. The first pressure against Catherine's ownership would not come from officials. It would come from his own father. That request did not emerge from nowhere, because buried behind the new ownership was one forgotten afternoon when a single breach of trust changed Elizabeth's plans forever. Long before William made the announcement, there had been another day when the garden's iron gate closed with unusual force. No statement followed. No courtier was permitted to discuss what had happened. Yet from that afternoon onward, Elizabeth changed the access rules, rewrote her private instructions, and began preparing Catherine for a responsibility no one else understood. The ownership battle did not begin with William's confirmation. It began when the late Queen discovered that one deeply personal boundary had been crossed. Elizabeth had always guarded the garden with unusual care. She allowed no publicity planning, staff tours, charitable receptions, or renovations without her direct approval. The private grounds were treated as personal space, not crown property, meaning land used for official royal business. Even senior members of the family understood that entering without permission was not a small mistake. It was a challenge to the monarch's trust. Camilla had begun seeing the garden differently. During the final years of Elizabeth's reign, the Queen Consort became interested in holding a small literary gathering there. She believed the event would honor royal tradition and strengthen her public role. To her, the idea felt respectful. To Elizabeth, it would soon feel like invasion. The point of no return came during a spring planning meeting. Elizabeth entered unexpectedly and found Camilla inside with two event advisors. They were discussing where guests might stand, where photographers could be placed, and where a reception table might be arranged. No permission had been requested. No approval had been given. Elizabeth did not shout. The monarch asked the advisors to leave, waited until the gate closed, and then faced Camilla alone. She told her that a refuge stopped being private the moment someone assumed the right to use it. Camilla tried to explain that the gathering was meant as a tribute, but the Queen ended the conversation before the defense could soften the breach. Catherine arrived shortly afterward and found Elizabeth standing beside a damaged flower border, where one advisor had stepped away from the path. The princess saw immediately that the monarch was not furious. She was wounded. Catherine knelt, restored the disturbed soil with her hands, and asked no questions. Elizabeth watched her in silence. That evening, the Queen dictated a new private instruction, naming Catherine as the garden's future sole owner. The written order stated that control must remain personal, independent, and protected from competing royal offices. It was not revenge, it was protection. William learned the truth years later, through a sealed memorandum. meaning a private written account kept closed until the proper time. In Elizabeth's own words, he discovered why the inheritance had changed. He now knew that Charles's proposed compromise could not stand, even if rejecting it humiliated Camilla face to face. The past had finally explained the inheritance, but explanation would not prevent collision. By sunset, William, Catherine, Charles, and Camilla were seated in the same room, with the garden between them. The meeting began with courtesy and ended with a sentence no one in the room could soften. Charles appealed to family unity. Camilla spoke of dignity. Catherine remained silent, unwilling to turn Elizabeth's final trust into a contest. Then William leaned forward, looked directly across the table, and made the boundary unmistakable. The garden belonged to his wife alone. In that instant, royal politeness collapsed, and years of unspoken resentment entered the room. Charles had arranged the meeting without aides because he believed family pressure could still achieve what formal authority could not. The king wanted a private compromise before the dispute became a visible palace division. He proposed that Catherine remain the legal owner while Camilla received the honorary title of garden patron, meaning a symbolic role without ownership. She would host one approved event each year, and the arrangement would be presented as unity. Catherine kept her hands folded as the proposal settled over the room. The princess said she respected Camilla's position, but respect did not give her the right to rewrite Elizabeth's intention. She refused to let the garden become a performance designed to hide discomfort. Her voice remained calm, yet it sharpened when she reminded Charles that the restriction had been created for a reason. Camilla turned toward William and stopped pretending the issue was ceremonial. The queen consort accused him of transforming a private inheritance into a public judgment against her. She asked whether he truly expected her to request Catherine's permission every time she wished to enter land tied to the monarchy. William answered that rank could not erase private ownership. The prince understood that the question was not really about access. It was about whether Camilla could accept a boundary she had not chosen. William reached for the patronage note at the center of the table. He folded it once and placed it beside Charles. Then he faced Camilla directly. There will be no honorary owner, no second authority, and no automatic access. It is hers. The words cut through every remaining defense. Catherine looked toward her husband, while Charles stared at the folded proposal. Camilla did not move. William then disclosed the spring incident through Elizabeth's sealed memorandum, a private written record preserved for later examination. He explained that the late queen had changed the inheritance after discovering Camilla planning an unauthorized event inside the garden. Charles turned toward his wife, stunned that the full account had never reached him. The king asked whether it was true. She insisted the meeting had been misunderstood and that her intentions had been respectful. Camilla demanded to see Elizabeth's original memorandum. Charles agreed that the record must be examined before any final judgment was made. William had won the argument in the room, but the next battle would be fought inside the machinery of the monarchy, where memory, law, and royal power do not always belong to the same person. By the following morning, the dispute had moved beyond wounded pride. Senior custodians opened Elizabeth's sealed instructions, property records were placed under review, and Charles was confronted with a limitation few expected. Even the reigning monarch could not simply reverse this decision. The garden had been separated from ordinary household control with extraordinary precision. Yet the most powerful moment did not occur when the clause was read aloud. It came when the king recognized why his mother had written it that way. Charles listened as the ownership structure was explained. The garden had been placed inside a private family trust, meaning a legal arrangement that protected personal property outside ordinary royal administration. It was not part of the operational crown estate, the property system used to support official monarchy duties. Elizabeth had kept full control during her lifetime and named Catherine as the only successor with authority over access, preservation, and future use. William stood nearby, but his power was narrower than many had assumed. The prince had announced the transfer and defended its terms. Yet he did not own the grounds and could not direct Catherine's choices. His duty was to ensure Elizabeth's instructions were carried out without interference until the garden passed safely into his wife's hands. The royal custodian read the final restriction aloud. Charles learned that no reigning monarch could order shared ownership, force automatic access, or absorb the property into another royal household. The king slowly removed his glasses. Then he asked everyone except William to leave. Charles waited until the door closed before turning on his son. He accused the future king of making him appear powerless inside his own family. William did not retreat. He reminded his father that Elizabeth had created the limitation herself. Protecting her boundary was not rebellion, and respecting Catherine's ownership was not an attack on the crown. Charles finally admitted the truth he had avoided for years. He had never asked his mother why Camilla's unauthorized garden proposal wounded her so deeply. The monarch had assumed the disagreement would fade if no one discussed it. Instead, his silence allowed the injury to harden into a final instruction. The custodian then delivered a personal letter Elizabeth had left for Charles. In the documented message, she explained that Catherine was chosen because she entered the garden without entitlement and left without taking anything from it. The sentence struck the king harder than any legal clause. His mother had judged character, not rank. One final step remained. Catherine had to sign the acceptance register, the formal record confirming that she accepted full ownership, and decide who would retain permanent access. Camilla's name could appear only through Catherine's personal choice. The legal question was settled, but the human cost was only beginning, because Catherine now had to make the decision everyone else had tried to make for her. Ownership became real not when Catherine received the keys, but when she was handed the access register. Each name represented a relationship, a memory, and a possible future conflict. William stood back, refusing to influence her. Charles waited elsewhere for the result. Camilla remained convinced that rank would protect her. Then Catherine drew one careful line through an existing household privilege, and the palace understood that Elizabeth's sanctuary would no longer bend to titles. Catherine signed the ownership register inside the garden cottage, while William and the property custodian watched. The register was the formal record, proving that she had accepted full control and responsibility. Her hand paused before the final stroke. This was not simply land passing from one woman to another. It was a promise to protect the grounds, the privacy around them, and the boundary Elizabeth had defended until the end. Catherine kept permanent access for William, their children, Charles, Princess Anne, and the essential gardening staff. Everyone else, including royal offices, would need to request entry for a clear personal reason. The princess understood why that mattered. Without firm rules, the garden could quickly become a place for ceremonies, publicity, and influence the very pressures Elizabeth had tried to keep outside. Camilla received the decision from an aide in her dressing room. The queen consort learned that her household no longer held standing access, meaning the automatic right to enter without asking permission. She dismissed the aide, removed one pearl earring, and then stopped. The second remained in place as she sat in silence, realizing that rank had not protected her. Catherine felt no satisfaction. She told William that removing Camilla's automatic privilege did not mean issuing a permanent personal ban. The prince listened as his wife admitted that the decision troubled her. She would not use Elizabeth's garden as punishment, but she could not pretend trust remained unbroken simply to make the palace comfortable. Charles reacted with sadness rather than anger. The king discovered that his own permanent access had been preserved while his wife's had not. He understood the distinction immediately. Catherine had shown respect for him, without surrendering judgment over Camilla, leaving him unable to describe the decision as an attack on his reign. One discovery changed the mood again. Catherine learned that Elizabeth had kept a small rose enclosure sealed behind a second locked gate. Only the new owner could enter. Inside waited a box containing final written instructions, intended for her alone. Catherine did not open it immediately. Instead, she sent Camilla a personal message, asking her to come to the garden without Charles, William, aides, or lawyers. For the first time since the announcement, the two women would face one another without husbands, titles, or palace offices standing between them. There was no formal greeting when Camilla entered the garden. Catherine stood waiting beside the path, holding no file and offering no prepared statement. For several seconds, neither woman spoke. The silence carried Elizabeth's absence, William's defiance, Charles's regret, and every comparison the monarchy had forced upon them. Then Catherine unlocked the inner rose enclosure and made a choice no legal clause required one that would determine whether the inheritance ended in punishment or understanding. Catherine had insisted that they enter alone. No secretary would record the meeting, no husband would interrupt, and no courtier would reshape their words afterward. The princess wanted a conversation without an institutional buffer, meaning no palace office or official standing between two people. That mattered because every previous exchange had been filtered through rank, duty, and public fear. Catherine spoke first. She told Camilla that the meeting was not a negotiation and that ownership would not be shared. But she also said Elizabeth's memory could not become a weapon passed from one royal woman to another. The queen consort listened without answering. For once, she had no title strong enough to control the direction of the conversation. Camilla finally admitted the truth. In a private account given directly to Catherine, she acknowledged entering the garden with advisors without permission. She had believed a successful literary gathering might prove that Elizabeth trusted her public role. Instead, her attempt to force acceptance had confirmed the monarch's doubts. Camilla said she had wanted recognition so badly that she stopped seeing the boundary in front of her. Catherine answered with a confession of her own. The princess said inheriting the garden frightened her because every decision would be treated as a judgment. If she allowed Camilla inside, some would call her weak. If she refused, others would call her cruel. She did not want to become severe while claiming to protect something gentle. Catherine then placed the second key in Camilla's hand, but did not release it. She explained that it was not ownership, permanent access, or restored privilege. It was one invitation to enter honestly, without planners, photographers, or claims. Inside the rose enclosure, Catherine opened Elizabeth's final written instruction. The message said, "The sanctuary must be protected from entitlement, but never closed against sincere remorse." The words changed everything. The late queen had intended boundaries to preserve grace, not create endless revenge. Camilla returned the key voluntarily. She asked whether she might come again someday as Catherine's guest. The princess said yes, but only privately. What began behind a locked gate could not remain hidden for long, and when the world learned how Catherine had used her new authority, the story changed from royal exclusion to royal character. By sunrise, the inheritance dominated every royal conversation in Britain. Commentators called it a transfer of influence. Newspapers framed it as Elizabeth's final endorsement of Catherine. Crowds gathered expecting another chapter of palace warfare. Then one image appeared, not of Camilla being expelled, nor of Catherine celebrating, but of two women leaving the private gate several steps apart, both visibly moved. That photograph altered the public mood because it revealed strength without cruelty and reconciliation without surrender. Catherine's ownership was confirmed through a formal palace notice. The statement named her as the sole private owner and guardian of the garden under Elizabeth's written instructions. A guardian, in this context, meant the person personally responsible for protecting the grounds and deciding how they could be used. The notice also made clear that management would remain separate from the offices of Charles and Camilla. This mattered because no royal title could now quietly reclaim control. The reactions split immediately. Some broadcasters described the decision as the late queen's strongest expression of trust in the future queen. Others focused on Camilla's loss of automatic access and warned that the monarchy had entered a lasting family division. Catherine heard both versions, yet she refused to answer either one. The princess knew that every public word could turn a private act of mercy into another contest. One newspaper changed the tone. Its front page carried the photograph beneath the headline, "Her garden, her grace." Catherine held the gate open while Camilla walked through with reddened eyes and empty hands. The queen consort carried no key, no title, and no claim. Yet she had not been humiliated, she had been invited. Outside Windsor Castle, a crowd gathered near the public barrier as broadcasters repeated the details. When one presenter explained that Camilla had entered only as Catherine's personal guest, a woman lifted a bouquet and said, "That is what authority should look like." The sentence spread because it captured what palace language could not. Catherine had defended ownership without turning another woman's defeat into entertainment. Charles watched the coverage during breakfast. The king remained silent until he noticed the way his wife was shown leaving the gate. Catherine had protected Camilla's dignity even after refusing her privilege. His defensiveness began to soften into relief. William learned the full truth from a private account shared by palace staff. The prince had not arranged the meeting, written Catherine's words, or guided the reconciliation. His wife had acted alone. Sole ownership was no longer symbolic. It had become proof of her independent judgment. Charles then asked Catherine, William, and Camilla to meet him privately that evening. This time, the monarch wanted no compromise. The world had delivered its reaction, but only one judgment still mattered: what the family would say when the doors closed and there was nothing left to contest. The final meeting contained no raised voices, no disputed papers, and no demand for another review. The garden now belonged to Catherine. Its limits had been tested and upheld. Yet the true verdict was larger than ownership. Elizabeth had not chosen the woman with the highest title, the longest history, or the strongest claim. She had chosen the person she believed could protect privacy without becoming possessive, exercise power without humiliation, and defend a boundary without allowing bitterness to grow inside it. Charles spoke first. The king told Catherine that he would not seek a patronage, shared title, or permanent privilege for any royal office. A patronage meant an official position, allowing a royal figure to support or represent a place or cause. He finally accepted why his mother had separated the garden from rank. Elizabeth had wanted its future protected from palace pressure, family ambition, and the quiet belief that status could erase personal limits. William then made his own position clear. The prince explained that his public confirmation had completed his formal duty. He had protected the transfer, but he would not control what happened next. From that moment forward, Catherine alone would decide who entered, how the sanctuary was preserved, and what meaning it would carry for their children. Charles turned toward Catherine and admitted the mistake he had tried to avoid naming. The monarch had asked her to accept a compromise because he wanted to protect Camilla from pain. In doing so, he had nearly asked Catherine to betray Elizabeth's written trust. His apology carried no defense. She accepted it quietly, understanding that his regret had finally become responsibility. Camilla followed with a promise of her own. The queen consort stated that she would never again claim automatic access or propose an official use for the grounds. She thanked Catherine for allowing honesty without public humiliation. Her private admission made the lesson unmistakable. Invitation could restore dignity, but entitlement could only destroy trust. Catherine later entered the garden cottage with William. She placed the main iron key on the same wooden hook Elizabeth had once used and closed the door gently. The princess told her husband that the garden must remain a refuge, never a trophy. He understood that the inheritance had revealed more than personal loyalty. It had shown how she would one day carry greater royal authority, firmly, privately, and without using another person's weakness as proof of her own strength. The garden did not crown a winner and condemn a loser. It established a standard. William protected Elizabeth's decision. Charles respected a boundary he could not command. Camilla accepted responsibility. Catherine turned exclusive ownership into disciplined stewardship. And so the gate closed not in anger, but in peace, leaving Catherine as its sole owner, Elizabeth's trust fully honored, and the monarchy stronger, because one woman proved that true royal power is measured not by what it seizes, but by what it protects. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.